She stood in the corner of the bank, still, silent, and watched by everyone. Her check was real. Her documents were in order. But for 47 minutes, no one treated her like she belonged. Why would a 14-year-old girl with a scholarship in hand be treated like a suspect? And why did the woman behind the counter seem more afraid of Lena's presence than of the truth she might uncover? This is not just a story about a bank visit gone wrong. It's about what happens when a young girl walks into power, quietly, and refuses to leave. It was a crisp Monday morning, the kind that smelled faintly of fallen leaves and fresh paper. 14-year-old Lena Thompson stood outside Oak Ridge Federal Bank, clutching a slim folder close to her chest. Inside was a $5,000 scholarship check, proof of the hours she'd spent buried in books, her countless early mornings, and the pride of being recognized for something she'd earned all on her own. She wore her school uniform, a navy blazer, pleated skirt, and polished loafers. It wasn't flashy, but she stood tall in it. Today marked a milestone, her first solo bank deposit. No hand-holding from her mother, no gentle reminders. Just Lena, walking into a world of polished marble floors and quiet authority. As the glass doors parted, she felt both excitement and nerves surge in her chest. Inside, the bank hummed with quiet activity. People in suits stood in line, others seated in leather chairs with papers in hand. Lena stepped toward the front desk, her fingers tightening around the folder. A teller waved her forward, a young man with a calm expression. But from across the room, Evelyn Marsh, the branch manager, noticed. Dressed immaculately in a tailored gray pantsuit, hair swept back, she stood out. Mid-40s, confident, sharp eyes, and when those eyes landed on Lena, something changed. Lena reached the counter. "I'd like to deposit this, please," she said, her voice soft but clear. The young teller, Miles Carter according to his name tag, took the check. His brows lifted. $5,000, he said louder than necessary. A few heads turned. "This yours?" "Yes," Lena said, trying not to shrink. "It's a scholarship. Academic. I brought the letter and my school ID." She handed them over with both hands, careful not to wrinkle the papers. Miles held the check up to the light, inspecting it like it might vanish. He didn't say a word as he walked away from the counter. That's when Evelyn stepped in. She didn't greet Lena, didn't ask questions. She took one glance at the check, then at Lena. "We've had issues with fraud lately," she muttered, not quietly enough. Lena blinked. "I have all the documentation," she said, her voice trembling. Evelyn's lips curled slightly. "You'll need to wait while we verify everything." No explanation, no eye contact. Lena nodded, stepping back. She stood near the corner, close to the potted plant and the ticking wall clock. People walked by without a glance. One man looked at her, then at her folder, then quickly away. Time passed. 10 minutes. 15. Lena's stomach churned. She reached for her pocket, then remembered. Her phone was still in her school locker. She hadn't needed it for a quick stop like this. I need to call my mom," she said softly. "That's not our concern," Evelyn replied, not even looking at her. "You'll wait?" The words stung, not because of what they were, but how they were said. Lena looked down. Her shoes, once polished, now dulled under the bank's cold lights. She shifted her weight. A whisper echoed from nearby. A man, glancing her way. Then a woman. Quiet murmurs, not cruel, not loud, just present, judging. She wrapped her arms around herself. The marble floor felt colder now. The space seemed bigger than before, the silence heavier. And in that silence, she heard something she wouldn't forget. From across the room, Evelyn spoke in a low voice to Miles. "We have standards here," she said. "We can't let just anyone walk in and act like they belong." The words fell like bricks. Lena's throat tightened. Her cheeks burned. She bit the inside of her lip to stop it from trembling. She had done everything right. She'd earned the check. She brought the papers. She came in respectfully, quietly, like her mother had taught her. So why did it feel like she was the one under investigation? The answer was already forming in her mind. Something she'd read about, but never truly lived until now. She knew why. She just didn't want to believe it. And still, no one spoke to her. Lena didn't cry. She stood still, hands clasped tightly around the edge of her folder, eyes fixed on the clock. It had been over 25 minutes now. No one had updated her. No one had even looked her way. In that stillness, memories surfaced. Quiet lessons whispered at the breakfast table, her mother's voice steady over the sound of clinking teacups. Clara Thompson wasn't just Lena's mother. She was the name behind Thompson Equity Group, one of the most respected financial advisory firms in the country. Her reputation had been built over decades, not by inheriting wealth, but by climbing the rungs others said she didn't belong on. She didn't wear her success like armor. It was quiet, earned, refined. Clara always reminded Lena, "Your worth isn't in your name, it's in your effort." And Lena believed that. She'd gotten into Westbridge Academy not because of her last name, but because she studied harder than anyone she knew. Her teachers often said she was unusually focused for someone her age. Her friends teased her for keeping a planner, but she liked it that way. Her achievements were hers. That morning had started like any other. Lena remembered it clearly. She came downstairs in her uniform, clutching the scholarship check freshly delivered the night before. Clara was at the table, glasses low on her nose, scanning a portfolio. "Morning, baby," Clara said, glancing up. Lena hesitated. "I'm going to the bank alone today." Clara looked up fully. "Are you sure?" "I need to do this," Lena said, "on my own." Clara studied her for a moment, then smiled. Not the kind of smile that said, "I'm proud," but the kind that said, "I see you stepping forward, even if I want to hold you back." "All right," she replied softly. "Call me when you're done." Lena nodded. "I'll be back before your meeting's over." She wasn't. Now, standing in this cold corner of the bank, Lena's fingers began to ache from gripping the folder too tightly. She shifted her gaze around the room. Everything gleamed. Marble countertops, polished brass signage, tailored suits. It was a place built to feel important. And yet, she felt smaller than she had ever felt before. People walked in and out. A man in a tailored navy blazer strolled past with no ID in hand. A smile from Evelyn, a wave toward the VIP lounge. A woman in high heels dropped her paperwork. 2 tellers rushed to help. But Lena? She stood in silence, invisible. Until now, she'd always believed that merit spoke louder than perception. Now she wasn't so sure. From her corner, she could hear Miles laugh lightly at something Evelyn said. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, dismissive. The kind of laugh that made someone else small. And for the first time, Lena felt something bubble beneath her skin. Not shame, not confusion. Anger. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that tightens slowly in your chest, that asks, "Why should I have to prove myself again?" She glanced down at the documents she'd brought. Award letter, school ID, even her student profile printout. Everything in order, everything verified. But it wasn't enough, because it wasn't about the paperwork. It was about the assumption. She wasn't expected to walk in with a $5,000 scholarship check. Not her. Not here. A sudden movement caught her eye. Across the lobby, Evelyn Marsh was greeting an elderly couple, white, well-dressed, chatty. Evelyn's entire posture changed, shoulders relaxed, smile wide, voice warm. "I'll walk you over myself," she said, gesturing graciously. And she did. Lena watched, stunned. That warmth, that dignity, it was right there. Just never offered to her. Not once. Lena pressed her lips together, willing herself not to flinch. She wasn't just ignored, she was excluded. And somewhere deep down, a part of her whispered, "This is not just a mistake. This is what people mean when they say some doors don't open for everyone." Time had become warped inside the bank. The seconds stretched like pulled thread, thin and brittle. Lena didn't know how long she'd been standing there now. Half an hour? 45 minutes? No one had told her anything. No one had even acknowledged her. She tried to focus her thoughts, to keep her posture upright. Her back ached slightly from the strain, her calves tight from standing so long in one spot. Still, she wouldn't move. Something inside her told her that moving would make it worse. That if she dared to act too confidently, too casually, it would only give them one more reason to doubt her. That was when she saw Evelyn Marsh again. The bank manager's sharp heels clicked across the polished floor, a staccato rhythm that echoed off the stone walls. She moved with purpose, heading toward the far side of the bank where a tall man stood, flipping through documents. He wore a gray wool coat, expensive but discreet, and held a leather briefcase. His posture, his tone, even from a distance, Lena could tell this man held power. Douglas Finch. The name came to her suddenly, as if whispered into her mind. She'd heard it before. At the dinner table, in late-night conversations when her mother had come home late from meetings. He was the CEO of Meridian Capital, a major player in the finance world, and a longtime rival of Clara Thompson's firm. Lena's breath caught. What was he doing here? She strained to listen, but their voices were low. Still, she watched carefully. Evelyn handed him a manila folder, discreetly marked confidential in faded ink. Douglas took it, flipping through the pages with deliberate interest. He nodded, then looked up at Evelyn with a smile, not polite or professional but approving. Lena felt her stomach twist. There was nothing overtly sinister in what she'd just seen. No shouting, no signatures, no clear crime. But everything in her body screamed that it wasn't right. The folder, the timing, the way Evelyn leaned in, almost conspiratorial. Lena's hands tightened around her folder. She reached slowly into her backpack and pulled out her leather-bound notebook, a gift from her mother on the day she started at Westbridge. "Always write down what matters," Clara had said, and so she began. Her pen trembled, but her mind was sharp. She recorded the time, the name, the body language. She described the folder, the glances, the smile that lingered too long. It wasn't proof, but it was a beginning. Across the room, Evelyn and Douglas shook hands. Their interaction lasted no more than 3 minutes, but it shifted the entire tone of the day. Because now, Lena knew this was no longer just about her. It wasn't just about the cold way she'd been spoken to, or the silence she'd been left in. This was about something deeper. Something that might hurt her mother's company, her family's integrity. The injustice had grown larger, and Lena was no longer just a silent observer. She was a witness. She closed the notebook quietly, slipping it back into her bag. Her heart thudded in her chest. She wasn't sure what this meant yet, but she knew one thing for certain. Evelyn Marsh wasn't just judging her because she was young, or black, or standing alone. She was hiding something, and Lena had seen it. The doors of Oak Ridge Federal Bank parted again, but this time the air in the room shifted. A hush that wasn't silence, more like awareness. Clara Thompson stepped through the entrance with the calm precision of someone used to being watched, and never once flinching under it. She wore a charcoal coat that brushed her calves, a silk scarf folded neatly at her collar. In one hand, her leather portfolio, in the other, her car keys, still warm from the engine. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes moved fast. They landed on Lena immediately, in the back corner. Alone. Upright, but too still. Clara didn't rush, she didn't call out. She simply walked forward, heels muted against the floor, posture unshakable. Each step was measured, controlled. Evelyn Marsh noticed her at the same moment, and straightened instinctively. "Miss Thompson," Evelyn said quickly, summoning a smile too wide, too late. "We weren't expecting you today. How can I assist?" Clara didn't answer. Not yet. She reached Lena first, and then the mask cracked. Her eyes flicked over her daughter. Her tight grip on the folder, the stiffness in her arms, the slight tremble in her lip. Clara didn't touch her. Not in public. Not when her daughter was trying so hard to hold the line. But her voice was low, warm. "Lena, are you all right?" Lena swallowed, nodded, her mouth open, but no words came out at first. Then, "I'm okay, but there's something you need to know." She opened her bag and pulled out the notebook. As Clara listened, Lena began to read. She read the time she arrived, the check amount, the way Evelyn spoke to her, the long silence, the preferential treatment of other customers, the laughter, the whispers, the delay. And then she described Douglas Finch, the folder, the handshake, the smile that didn't belong in a bank built on trust. Clara's face shifted, not with rage but with something quieter, colder, focus. When Lena finished, she closed the notebook. Her fingers were still trembling, but her voice didn't waver. Evelyn cleared her throat, stepping forward. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Clara turned slowly. "No." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I believe my daughter was mistreated. Not just ignored, not just inconvenienced, dismissed." Evelyn's smile faltered. "I assure you, and I believe," Clara continued, her tone sharpening just enough, "that you handed over confidential internal documents to an executive at Meridian Capital." The room went still. Even Miles, the teller, paused mid-transaction. "Do you deny this?" Evelyn blinked. I don't know what you're referring to." "I do," Clara replied, "and my legal team will too." She took a step closer, not threatening, just undeniable. "You left a 14-year-old alone, without communication, without supervision, while you conducted a transaction that may amount to corporate theft. I'm not only her mother, Miss Marsh. I am also the founder and chair of the firm you may have just attempted to sabotage." Silence, long, sharp. Then Clara said 6 words that felt like a stone thrown into still water. "You owe my daughter an apology." Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. You're done," Clara said, effective immediately. Her voice wasn't angry, it was final. Security didn't hesitate this time. One of the guards walked toward Evelyn, quiet but firm. Lena didn't watch her leave. She looked only at her mother, and in that moment she felt something shift, not in the room, but in herself. She had stood her ground, and now she was no longer standing alone. The bank didn't move right away. Even after Evelyn Marsh was escorted out, even after Clara Thompson issued the decision with unwavering calm, the silence hung like dust in the light. It wasn't just about the scholarship check anymore. It hadn't been for a while. Clara turned toward the front counter. "I want access to your regional director," she said to Miles, her voice smooth. "Now, this branch is under internal review until further notice." Miles nodded, stumbling slightly as he reached for the phone. Lena stood beside her mother, closer now but still not speaking. Her heart was still racing, not from fear this time, from clarity, from witnessing the line between power abused and power reclaimed. Minutes later, the assistant regional director arrived. There were apologies, quick meetings behind glass doors. Clara didn't raise her voice once. She simply handed over the notebook, Lena's notebook, and described the meeting between Evelyn and Douglas Finch with such precise detail that no one dared to interrupt her. By the end of the hour, the investigation had officially begun. Lena sat quietly in the corner of her mother's temporary office, once Evelyn's office, watching the room move around her. Security footage was pulled, staff were interviewed, documents re-verified. It wasn't just about discrimination anymore. It was espionage, and it ran deep. Evelyn had been feeding internal memos to Finch for months, trying to undermine Clara's firm before a major acquisition. Lena's check, her very presence, hadn't just been inconvenient. It had been an interruption, a witness. They hadn't wanted her there because she didn't fit their script. But now, she'd rewritten it. That evening, the regional compliance officer, an older gentleman with a silver pen and a tired voice, shook Clara's hand and said quietly, "If your daughter hadn't documented all of this, we'd never have known." He turned to Lena. "Most kids wouldn't have noticed." Lena didn't quite know how to respond, so she simply said, "She taught me to." That night, the news hadn't broken yet, but the walls were already changing. And the next morning, Clara received a call from the bank's executive committee. They wanted her to oversee a new internal equity review. She said yes, on one condition, that Lena would sit in on the first training. The building was the same marble floors, same walls washed in beige and brass. But when Lena stepped into Oak Ridge Federal Bank again a week later, something had shifted. People noticed her now, not with suspicion, not with that silent pause they'd given her the first time, but with recognition. She wasn't famous, but she was no longer invisible. She walked beside her mother, who was consulting with the new interim manager in human resources. Clara's stride was steady, her expression as composed as ever. But Lena? She was noticing things, like the receptionist, Andrea Klein, who gave her a quiet nod and a genuine smile. The same Andrea who'd tried to offer her a seat that day but was shushed by Evelyn before she could speak. Now she was in charge of front desk operations. Lena noticed the new posters in the lobby. "Respect begins at the door." Subtle, but honest. It felt surreal. Everything that had hurt so deeply just days ago now existed as part of a change in motion. Not fixed, not forgotten, but acknowledged. She still remembered what it felt like to be ignored. Still remembered the words whispered across the room. Still remembered the moment she realized they weren't checking the check. They were checking her. And yet now, she was standing taller. A few days later, Clara received a request from Westbridge Academy. The head counselor wanted Lena to speak during their student forum on ethics, community, and resilience. At first, Lena hesitated. "I'm not sure I want to talk about it," she admitted one evening, sitting across the kitchen table. Clara looked up from her laptop, closing it gently. "You don't have to. Not if you're not ready." Lena traced a circle on the rim of her mug. "But what if someone else goes through it, and they don't know it's not their fault?" That question lingered in the room like warm steam. Clara reached out. Just a hand on Lena's? No words. But the answer had already begun forming. 3 weeks later, Lena stood on the stage in the school auditorium. She wore the same blazer from the day at the bank. Not out of symbolism, but because she wanted to remember that she didn't have to change herself to be heard. The room was full of students, some friends, some not, a few teachers, a few parents, a few community members who had heard what happened. Lena cleared her throat and spoke. "I used to think if you worked hard and followed the rules, you'd be treated fairly," she began. "That effort was enough." She paused. "I don't believe that anymore, not because it's not partly true, but because it's not the whole truth." She told them what happened at the bank. The silence, the suspicion, the notebook. She didn't say it with bitterness. She said it with clarity. And when she was done, she said one thing that made the entire auditorium go still. "I don't tell this story to make anyone feel sorry for me. I tell it so you'll remember what it feels like to be looked at and not seen." Then she smiled, small but real. "And maybe, next time you see someone standing alone in the corner, you'll do something different." Applause came slowly, then all at once. Not loud, but full. Later, as the room cleared out, a freshman approached her. He didn't say much, just, "Thank you, that helped." And Lena knew something for certain. What happened that day at the bank hadn't broken her, it had revealed her. Spring came slowly to Oak Ridge. The trees were beginning to bloom again, their branches stretching like they too were remembering how to open. The sky stayed light longer now, and the morning walks to school didn't require scarves anymore. But for Lena Thompson, something deeper had changed. She no longer crossed rooms the same way. She noticed things more. Not just unfairness, but courage. Quiet courage. The kind that whispers rather than shouts. The kind that stands in the back corner of a bank with trembling hands and a notebook full of truth. The kind she now knew she carried. At home, life resumed its rhythm. Clara returned to work, her firm stronger than ever. The review at the bank had uncovered more than expected. Years of bias embedded in hiring practices, unreported complaints, and a pattern of small injustices that had been ignored because they didn't leave a mark. But Lena had left one. They'd started calling it the Thompson Memo, a formal summary of her observations and experiences, compiled into a document now used across several branches of the bank for training. It wasn't just paperwork, it was a voice, documented. Her notebook sat on the bookshelf now, beside Clara's old law school textbooks. Not locked away, but not forgotten. One Saturday morning, while making tea, Clara looked over the kitchen island and said, "You know, they asked if we'd consider doing a public piece on the whole thing. Podcast, maybe. Editorial." Lena looked up from her reading. "You mean, tell the story?" Clara nodded. "In our own words." Lena thought for a long moment, then said, "Only if we make space for other stories, too." Clara smiled. The bank didn't just change managers, it changed practices. Andrea Klein, the quiet receptionist who had tried to help, was promoted to a role that put her in charge of customer experience training. She now led workshops on implicit bias, empathy, and how to treat people with dignity, especially those who arrive without an appointment, without the expected look, without a last name that opens doors. And Lena? She kept writing. She started with short pieces for the school paper, then guest columns, then a podcast episode with Westbridge's Civics Club. The name Lena Thompson was no longer just a name on a check. It was a name people remembered. But Lena didn't do it for the attention. She did it for the girl who might walk into a bank next month with a different folder, a different check, a different face, and still be asked to prove she belonged. She did it because she had learned something her textbooks hadn't taught her. That truth, when held quietly but firmly, has weight. That respect shouldn't have to be earned twice. And that power doesn't always look like authority. Sometimes it looks like standing still when everything in you wants to run. That summer, while cleaning out a drawer in the study, Clara found a folded sheet of notebook paper. On it, in Lena's handwriting, were 3 simple lines. "I stood in the corner. I didn't leave. They saw me." She framed it without saying a word. Hung it near the front door, so every time they stepped out into the world again, they'd remember what had happened, what was overcome, and what still remained to be done. Because some stories don't end, they become part of the room itself. At MIA, we tell stories not just to remember, but to recognize. If you've ever been overlooked or seen someone else left standing in silence, this story is for you. Comment 1. If you've ever experienced something that made you feel invisible. Comment 2. If you believe stories like Lena's deserve to be heard more often. And if this moved you, subscribe to Mia, because every week we share the stories that others chose to ignore.